Good evening. It's Sunday evening, 7 June 2020. My name is Tuariki Delamere. I am the former Minister of Immigration for New Zealand, and currently I am the Principal Immigration Consultant, Immigration Advisor for TDA Immigration. Well, tomorrow we are all hoping and all expecting that the government will announce we are moving down to COVID-19 alert level 1. And let's hope that's what happens. Now, what I'm about to say is my opinion, and it's not necessarily confirming government announcements or policy. But I want to reflect and discuss the impact and current situation of COVID-19 for temporary visa holders. Now, looking back on 18 March, Deputy Prime Minister Winston Peters confirmed that the government were aware of 80,000 New Zealanders who were overseas and who would probably be returning over the next 2 months. Now, that number of 80,000 did not even include the many thousands of migrants who were currently holding valid New Zealand temporary visas, be they student visas, visitor visas, or work visas, and partnership visas. And tonight, most of my discussion, I want to focus on those people who hold valid visas or held valid visas and are now stuck offshore, unable to return to New Zealand. Now, as you're all aware, on the 25th of March, New Zealand went to alert level 4, where pretty much you were confined to your own houses, except for people in COVID-19 critical occupations. On 10th of April, the government confirmed from that date on, there was a mandatory 14-day quarantine at an approved facility for every person entering New Zealand. However, they also said that only New Zealand residents and New Zealand citizens with their accompanying children and partners who had valid visas were permitted to enter New Zealand. Others who could enter on application were temporary work visa holders employed in a COVID-19 critical occupation, such as doctor or nurse. On application, it was possible they could be granted travel permission as an exception. However, all other persons, including all of those people on valid temporary visas, were not permitted to enter New Zealand. I'm not sure the numbers, over 10,000, somewhere between 10 and 20,000 people, I understand. Why was that? Why were those people not permitted to enter New Zealand? The government has never said why, but because of an interview given by the Minister of Immigration 2 days ago, the Honourable Ian Lees-Galloway, I now know the answer. During the 3 weeks prior to the border closure, 40,000 New Zealanders returned from overseas. And during the past 2 months since the border closure, just over 200 New Zealand residents, New Zealand citizens have entered New Zealand every day. Now, with a 14-day mandatory quarantine period, this meant that the government needed a capability to quarantine more than 2,800 persons. And in his interview a couple of days ago, the Minister Ian Lees-Galloway confirmed that the government only had a capacity and ability of managing 3,200 persons in quarantine at any one time. And so that is clearly and obviously the reason valid temporary visa holders were not permitted to travel to New Zealand. New Zealand only had the capacity to manage and control proper quarantining for New Zealand citizens and New Zealand residents. They did not have the ability to provide acceptable quarantine facilities for visa holders, temporary visa holders. But it puzzles me as to why the Minister Lees-Galloway or the government didn't explain this. While all of those affected, those 10,000 plus visa holders who still can't return, while they'll still be upset, at least they did deserve to know what drove the government to make that decision. Anyway, that's what happened. So, and of course, the big questions now are, when will the border reopen for those with temporary visas that are still valid? Well, I don't know. And actually, I don't think the government knows either. Because of the nature and the devastation of the COVID-19 crisis, it's not just what happens in New Zealand. Yes, we appear to have crushed COVID-19, but the risk to New Zealand is it gets reintroduced from overseas by people returning. So the likelihood is that the only countries that are going to be considered for travel into New Zealand will be countries like Australia, the Pacific Islands, possibly China, Taiwan, Vietnam, Hong Kong. Those countries appear to have controlled and pretty much crushed COVID-19, or in the case of the Pacific Islands, most of them never had it. But if you are currently based in Europe, USA, Canada, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, the Middle East, South America, you're not coming back anytime soon. Those countries, the virus is still raging. Thousands every day have been added to the registers in those countries. Hundreds and hundreds, thousands are still dying. And I can't see New Zealand government allowing any travel from those countries for temporary visa holders. And also remember, it's not just New Zealand that has its borders closed. So does the rest of the world. So even when we want to open our borders, we also have to engage with other countries to see if they're willing to allow planes from New Zealand, people in their country to leave. The other question is, what will the government do for those people who had valid temporary visas as at 10 April 2020, when our borders closed? But those visas have or will have expired before we reopen our borders. Well, in my opinion, and it seems to be indicated by the government, every one of those persons is likely going to have to reapply for a new visa. Right now, if you're one of those people, should you reapply now? Well, I guess you've got nothing to lose, but I'm pretty sure even if you apply now, your application is probably going to sit there for some time because the government still is not sure what to do yet as far as who and when they will let people in. And also, you're going to have to comply with the new rules. I'm pretty sure of that. But what are those new rules? I don't know. And at the moment, the government doesn't know. They'll have to wait and see until they fully understand the impact of COVID-19 on New Zealand, especially the employment situation and the sustainability, the financial viability of many hundreds and thousands of companies, of employers. However, I think the partners, children of New Zealand resident, New Zealand citizens will be okay. You'll get your visas approved very quickly, I'm sure, and as soon as the border reopens, you'll be allowed back in. However, the partners and children of temporary visa holders, that is, if the principal is in New Zealand already, you're likely to find it a lot more difficult to get a visa to come into New Zealand. Essential skills work visa holders, or those who held work visa holders that have since expired or will expire before the borders open. There are going to be major changes, in my opinion, and the qualification bar will be raised significantly higher. What will those changes be? Again, I don't know. What I can tell you, the focus will be on availability for employment of New Zealand residents and citizens. And we're already seeing that right now. People who are already in New Zealand trying to get their visas changed, the variation of conditions. Immigration have started coming back already and demanding that the person prove as of today, as of the processing of application today, whether or not there are New Zealanders available for that job. The fact that you have a labour market check from pre-COVID doesn't matter. It's not valid anymore. You have to get an update on that. And that obviously signals bad news, because if the labour market check of today says there are New Zealanders available, you're not going to be approved. Now, for those people looking to come back and you need new visas, if you were employed as a retail manager occupation in a dairy or a cafe manager, it looks bad. I cannot see the government granting anyone a visa who has a job or had a job in a dairy or a cafe. The hospitality industry has been devastated. Tourism has been devastated. So the government will be raising the bar very high, I think, on those low-level jobs. Qualified tradespeople, I think many of you will be okay. Electricians, plumbers, carpenters, probably yes. Car mechanics, possibly more difficult. Now the question is, when will they let students back into New Zealand? There's been a big call and demand from universities, high schools for this to happen. And not surprisingly, they get a significant amount of the revenue, many of them, from international students. But the problem for the government is, how do you quarantine them? Who's going to pay for the costs? I can tell you now, the New Zealand taxpayer doesn't want to pay for the costs. And what numbers are we talking about? 50,000? 40,000? Who knows? It's a lot. And so how do you quarantine them? Now, while I hope I am wrong, I do find it difficult to believe that new international students will be allowed into this country in this calendar year. When you look at the world stats on a daily basis as to COVID-19, the common sense conclusion is it's unlikely new students will be allowed back into this country in 2020. The first countries that New Zealand will give approval to are likely to be Australia, Pacific Islands, China, Taiwan, Vietnam, Hong Kong, because those are the countries who appear to have crushed COVID-19. But as a New Zealand citizen, not as a former minister, not as an immigration advisor looking for business, I do not believe and I do not want to see students at the moment coming in from Europe, the USA, Canada, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Middle East, South America, until those countries, those areas have managed to get control of COVID-19. For those countries at the moment, their numbers are pretty horrific. They're all still climbing. Tourists, visitor visa applicants, when will they be allowed back in? Not anytime soon, in my opinion. Again, the countries, for those people, tourists will have to show that they have substantially beaten COVID-19. And also, let's not forget, airlines have to start flying internationally again. There are precious few flights coming into New Zealand. I think before COVID-19, there was something like 130, 140 flights flying into New Zealand every week from China. You know, the numbers right now are sort of like 8 or 9. So even if we want to let people in, we've got to get the airlines up and going again. And most airlines are in severe financial trouble at the moment. Now, temporary visa holders currently in New Zealand, look, make sure you reapply for your new visa if your current visa is due to expire in the coming months. Better get it in as soon as possible. We don't know what the rules are going to be, but the sooner you get it in, the better, I think. Now, if you're a partner of a New Zealand resident or citizen, I don't think there's any problem. You'll be prioritized because you're easy to do, and you'll get your visa through pretty quickly, I would think. Students already in New Zealand, I think the government will likely ease up on some of the requirements they had pre-COVID-19. We want you to stay, and perhaps they won't be quite as tough as they were before. However, those of you who are on essential skills work visas, unfortunately, I believe life could be pretty problematic for many of you. I know you have wanted to stay in New Zealand. You want to make New Zealand your permanent home. But let's be honest, the government's first priority, especially with an election coming up in about 14, 15 weeks, is to New Zealand residents and New Zealand citizens. And if the government is perceived to be giving visas, granting visas at the cost of New Zealanders being able to get those jobs, the government will be voted out of office. And I can't see that happening. And while I don't like being the bearer of the bad news, I do believe all of you are entitled to know the truth. There have been too many people out there, some in my sector, immigration consultants, I think being overly positive. And I know 2 months ago, there were people criticizing me for being a negative Nelly. And everything that I predicted has come true. And yes, we've got a long way to go. If I can help, by all means, feel free to contact me through my office. The details will come after this. Anyway, thanks for listening and stay safe.